We have now done this, well, quite an extended series that it's turned into, which theoretically started years ago with the first seed wars. And I want to say tonight, tonight's session would kind of be like a temporary conclusion for the time being on the seed wars series. Again, as I say, for now, because I think there is more that can be said, but this will be it for the current moment with what we do tonight. I thought, with all the talk of what we've had of spiritual issues and, talking about some very strange and odd topics on the supernatural realm, it wouldn't be worth much if we didn't find a way to tie it all into how does it come to bear on us directly in a way. And that's what tonight's going to be about. You can breathe a sigh of relief because I don't think tonight is going to be nearly as intense as the last few weeks of teaching has been in terms of being bombarded with new and very strange ideas. I'm deliberately going quite the opposite. And I think I'm partially going quite the opposite because I think there's such a danger in terms of dealing with supernatural content like this that a person can, inspire either morbid fascination that's dangerous for its own reasons or create an unnecessary kind of fear. I think there's probably more things that could be happening. I have had to be aware, even for tonight's session, to also consider the responsibility I'm going to have and the weight of pressure that will be on me to clearly communicate when I'm using a term like spiritual warfare or just talking about spiritual warfare generally, because of, again, sadly, a very irresponsible job I think that has been done within mainstream, um, let's even just call it charismatic Christianity, because not all forms of Christianity have gotten overexcited with this topic. In fact, we could ironically say other portions of Christianity would completely ignore this. And then I'm going to extend it further and go even into my own religious realm and say the same about Judaism. Any sect of Judaism who's not taking issues of spiritual warfare seriously is equally irresponsible to those sectors of the Christian realm that are doing the same. And again, even for Judaism, they can be going over the top. That's when Kabbalah gets out of control. And then there's obviously those outrightly ignoring it. And in those cases, what you'll tend to find is that the emphasis ends up being more on rabbinical Judaism and all its trinkets, which is very often beautiful. And I love some of them, and I just got to so carefully managed. So, we've got dangers on all kinds of sides with this. So again, as always, my goal, my hope is to be as responsible and down the middle of the road kind of thing, very responsibly, guided by our rabbis. In Judaism, there's more rabbis probably than Jews. I'm being sarcastic now in a way, but the point being that everyone has a rabbi or a set of rabbis, and there are the corporate general rabbi heroes of antiquity as well, running even into what you could call, compared to the first century at least, the modern eras, rabbis in Europe and all around. So everyone has rabbis in Judaism, is the point I'm making. And when you move into the realm of Christianity, if that's where you find yourself, you have pastors, you have all of that. And everyone's listening to someone. That's effectively the point. And it's not wrong that everyone's listening to someone. Obviously, the big issue is what are those someone's saying? And that's where my responsibility becomes quite sobering, and I'm okay with that. It's necessary for it to be a reasonably scary thing to manage. So hopefully I do a decent job of that tonight. You'll be able to decide that by the time we get through this. So let's get into it. Spiritual wars, the real spiritual warfare story. please, as I've already said, I'm deliberately not making this exhaustive tonight because I don't believe you could do this exhaustively. I've had the option to show you just how much documentation there is within Judaism, especially in the intertestamental period with books like, well, so many different kinds, Jubilees, Jasher, Enoch, um, the testament of the patriarchs. There's a, it's, yeah, it just, there's endless supply, and it's beautiful literature, and it's complicated to try and explain how that's supposed to be used just because you've got so many different opinions, especially when you're talking to a Christian, of course. So that complicates it too, and trying to make them understand that there's value in that without it undermining scripture. And it's not undermining scripture, actually, and trying to explain that much of what their beloved apostles, and obviously ours too, um, have leaned on those documents. But to try and explain all that, I wasn't going to try and do that tonight. I think I mentioned it over the last few weeks, with just sprinkles of information. I can't do that yet tonight because we will have a more intense session than we've ever had before on that topic. I think leaving that kind of intensity is better. That kind of intensity is better left for the books that I'm working on. Obviously, as I've said, I think last week I did get a chance to say this before we were cut off, that the next book is on its way. Fire on the Mountain of the Gods is definitely in process. So that is definitely something to look forward to. I'm excited about it. But okay, let's get into what we're looking at. Yeah. Um, the minute this flashed on the screen, I know Nande probably would have gotten a reasonable smile on his face because he instantly know what he's looking at. Maybe some of the rest of you do, especially if you've got kids or grandkids running around, you might have been exposed to something of this. What we are looking at, for the sake of the audio only podcasting version of this, it is a picture of the Avengers. Well, not a picture, it's a digital drawing of it, which is phenomenally beautiful. I love it. So you've got all the core Avengers on the screen. Um, and they are in a war scene. They're standing ready for battle. You can see some of them are actively posed to continue the battle that's clearly busy raging around them. So this is a familiar scene. This is what we expect when we watch Marvel movies. We expect drama. We expect war. We expect bloodshed. We expect suffering, sacrifice. That's just what we expect. Next slide. Again, very famous cult classic. We're looking at a scene from Star Wars again. And as with the previous one, it's obviously a dramatic action sequence happening here. We're going to talk more about Star Wars, in fact, before the session is over now. It'll make sense why when we get there. This, I can tell you, is a scene or a picture from a game, an Xbox game, called Gears of War. As you can tell, these are mean fighting machines. I will confess to you, this is one of my favorite games. I, in fact, play this game, and it is as vicious as it looks. So that's Gears of War for you. And then here's another one, looks quite frightening, and actually probably will make you think of Nephilim and some of the topics we've been dealing with. This beast-looking creature covered in armor, obviously in a fighting pose himself, and also in a war scene. This is from Guild Wars 2. Yeah, so I think you're probably starting to notice a pattern here. Let me ask Nande. Nande, can you recognize what picture this is? I know you don't have much exposure to this yet, but I suspect you might recognize it.
The Mandalorian.
That's right, The Mandalorian. This is another spin-off show from Star Wars. And I'll tell you what I find interesting about The Mandalorian. So The Mandalorian is part of a group of, well, you rebels, call it mercenaries, whatever you want to call it, that are trying to get rid of despotic dictatorship and the empire that they are trying to. And you know what I find amazing about this? The catchphrase in The Mandalorian, like the phrase that these warriors use when they talk to each other. I kid you not. They say, This is the way. So, it's a beautiful like statement they may call it a mantra, whatever you want to call it. This is the way. But what I loved about it is because the first followers of Jesus within Judaism were called the way. Now, I know John Favreau wrote this story. I'm not sure if he's Jewish. I don't know if he is. I mean, maybe he is, and I just haven't come across it. But for me, it was very interesting to find that that phrase would become so important, and it's very important in the story. So yeah, Nandi, I might have spoiled that for you. I don't know if you've gotten that far, but I don't think you have. But anyway, we'll have to watch it together and get more, so you'll get to experience where they do that. Next one, Nandi, you're going to be shocked to realize that you should recognize this picture too. Also, again, looking quite vicious. Yeah, what you've got here is a strategy game, very, very successful, grossed serious money strategy game called StarCraft. And Nande knows this game because he's gotten into it with me. It's very much, it's as much about, it's more about strategy than it is anything else. But obviously, it's a war situation. As you can tell, these creatures, believe it or not, this is the team that I play as. I play as these, well, I guess you could call them aliens. I don't know what you'd call them. So obviously, you've got different breeds of these aliens or these troops, however you want to call it. And your job is to literally build civilization. And you're competing with other civilizations, other characters doing the same thing. And it's war. It literally is war. That your job is to actually overwhelm your enemies. So everyone's in the same game, in the same map, apart from each other, building little um, headquarters, I'd say. Nanda, I'm getting in the mood to play this. In fact, as dramatically odd as that sounds, don't worry, you don't see these creatures looking as crazy as they do. Yeah, they are actually just little icons on the screen because, as I said, the main point of this game tends to actually just be playing strategy. It's like just a creative chess game, really. But even Holly, myself, and Nanda have played this, and Holly keeps on asking me, "Can we play it again?" Because again, the strategy element, but it's that idea of conquering as well that makes it what it is, and it draws people's attention. The the character element to it is actually just the backstory of it, and you end up choosing these characters based on what you feel you can work best to build up the strongest armies with quicker than your opponents, of course. So that ends up being how people choose this. But what you should have noticed by now is that there is a common theme with everything I've shown you. So let's get some thoughts. What are you picking up as a common theme with everything I've shown you so far?
Just one massive big fight all the way,
Right.
fighting.
And that's, I mean, you saw it now in the movie theme that I showed you that's so popular, which again, obviously it is when we speak about cinema stuff and entertainment, games, and all of that, books, movies, it's everywhere, right? So I've got a question with that. And this is the question. What does Hollywood or the entertainment industry know about us? So if you think about it, Hollywood is making this stuff. Entertainment industries make these games and these stories and all of this stuff. What is it that they know about us? I mean, they're doing this with success. And again, I said I'm going to show you something about Star Wars later that's going to, well, I'm going to show you now actually. That's going to shock you. It's going to be quite a shock to your system, I think. The better question I thought we could then ask, actually, maybe more to the point, is what does Hollywood or the entertainment industry know about reality? I think that's a fair question. Because with all the amount of time and energy and money that gets poured into these themes, they know something. And if they're getting a return on what they're doing, that tells you that they're not wasting their time or their money, clearly, because it's working. So I want to show you evidence of this. Now, this was taken 2 years ago for Hanukkah. I did a teaching. Well, I did the Hanukkah teaching 2 years ago. Nande will remember because he was there for it. I don't think anyone else of you would have been, no. So Nanda will be the only one that can recall this. I turned the entire Hanukkah teaching time. We had a physical meeting together. We had a lovely celebration together. I turned the entire session into a theme based on Star Wars and the new movie that had come out. How could I base Hanukkah that year on Star Wars? It was ridiculously easy, in fact, because as we've just already noted, um, the entire story of Star Wars is pretty much like the story of Hanukkah. I used that theme that year to say the rise of Messiah, Hanukkah, which obviously is a play on the movie The Rise of Skywalker. All of that was deliberately done, of course. And it was well received and it made sense. And it got to get a group of people, some of which have never done this before. I'm just literally now going to show you some of the movies from Star Wars. This is the series of Star Wars. And this should tell you, with all these movies I'm putting on the screen now, this should be telling you that this is a very successful franchise. And what is it all based on? It's in the name. Star Wars. All of these movies are Star Wars. Even with their little chapters, however you want to see it, it's not done. It continues. So again, you end up asking yourself, what does Hollywood know that's so deeply embedded in the human psyche, for one? And then furthermore, what does Hollywood know about reality that it is willing to invest billions upon billions of dollars into war theme? So here's something to show you again. And, as you look at the story of Star Wars, it might actually help you answer the question I'm asking. The Empire in Star Wars. The First Galactic Empire is described and portrayed in various Star Wars media as a brutal dictatorship, one based on nationalization, state terrorism, xenophobic hatred, enslavement and genocide of non-humans, power projection, threat of lethal force, and above all else, constant fear. So let's just think about those very negative words we see there. And do you realize that there are human beings across the globe with connection to Western civilization and Western entertainment who are giving billions in, all considered, all the money, all the spending added up. They are giving billions to be entertained by stories of these negative words that I've just read out to you: terrorism, xenophobic hatred, enslavement, genocide. We are paying, not just in movies, in merchandise, in books, in everything. Star Wars is making billions. Let me show you another level of this. This is, again, I'm still showing you elements. We're not going to have to do the whole teaching. I'm showing you elements from the Hanukkah teaching I did with this. Rebels with a cause, okay? So if you've ever seen Star Wars, one of the key characters are Jedi, and they are, of course, so let's just get that Jedi back on. They are your key protagonists. They are the heroes of the story. They obviously have conflict within themselves. But it's interesting too. One of the things that's worth noting is that when you get into the Star Wars universe and you start understanding the concept of all of this, the Jedi tend to be priests in a sense. They are guardians. And again, that's not coincidental. When you look at George Lucas's background and what he was aiming to do, he was a smart man when he created this. And again, did he create something original? Not as much as you might think, since he's taken ideas that are well known to mankind already and he just made a lot of money from it. This is how much money. Now, I'm trying to remember the $4.05 billion. If I'm not mistaken, I think this is the amount that Disney paid George Lucas for the Star Wars franchise. Now, of course, that comes with...
That would be correct, Steve.
Is it? Yes, I thought that was the number I pulled. So that obviously... Yeah, that includes a lot of different, the company George Lucas made in the name of Star Wars and that too. But I mean, who pays $4.05 billion for a fantasy idea, for something that's fake? Because that's the reality of what happened here. And again, the answer becomes, what does Hollywood know about the human psyche, and what does Hollywood know about reality that's working? Because if they're paying $4.05 billion, you've got to know they expect to make multiple amounts of that money back. And I think they are. And again, I think this is the point we need to understand, is that something's going on in our world. And whether we know it deliberately, whether we know it, we can confirm it just with our own hearts and minds and speak about it. We know in the deepest part of who we are, guess what? There's a war. There is a real war going on. And the reason why we can gravitate towards entertainment that talks about this is because we are so sure of it. It's embedded in us. It's intrinsically wired into us to know that that's happening. So that's why Hollywood gets to do what it does. That's why the entertainment industry can be built on blood and war and all of that. It's not as dramatic as it sounds, in the sense of, oh, the kids can't watch this stuff. The stuff is hardwired into your kids already. And I'm not saying go out and show them things that I don't. You see, I don't let Holly watch or see things of that kind of nature without me being there or having checked it myself first, and all of that. And obviously, guiding her through it and talking to her about it and reminding her what's not real and all this. So I'm not saying, screw it, just let your kids see and do whatever, and there's no reason for concern. But the reality is, conflict is all around us. Your favorite action movie, your favorite comedies, isn't there always struggle? Isn't there a war on different levels? The bully at the school, the impossible challenge they've got to get through. There's an enemy in the movie, even when it's a comedy, even when it's a romantic story. There's always the conflict, because it's unavoidable, effectively, is I guess what I want to say. But we're not going to talk about Hollywood. That's not our goal for tonight. We want to get somewhere else. And I'm going to recap on a little bit of what we said last week. Not going to spend a lot of time on this. But remember, I spoke about the cosmic gospel. And here's what we said. This was from the Seed Wars. So this is last week's session. Cosmic Gospel. I am in the process of getting the files up for this now to be onto the YouTube channel. So that will be on over this weekend. But I just want to show you again what I said about the Cosmic Gospel. Yeah, the quote from Derek P. Gilbert, because I think it's worth getting the overview. That general overview again is worth getting. The Bible is a chronicle of the long war, there's that word war, by the fallen Elohim, their demonic offspring, and human collaborators against the authority of our Creator. There's more information about this war in Scripture than we've been taught. I don't think people can hear that enough really effectively. So that's why I don't mind saying it now. Again, this might be the third time in the third session we hear it. So in the last few weeks, we have been talking specifically, obviously, about the history of mankind. We've been talking about the original celestial rebellions. We've been talking about how that started affecting man on earth, because those are important aspects to understand, especially if we want to understand who Jesus is, what he's done for us. And of course, as we say, how Gentile people can feel restored to who is now the God of Israel. Because as we've noted, as we teach in RBS, as you're learning, and as hopefully you are teaching others when you're talking to them in getting a proper gospel message out there, we have to understand that once upon a time, yes, God loved everyone and everyone was in harmony with God, but then something went wrong. And this something went wrong before Israel even existed. So that's what's important to note, and that's why I always speak about Genesis 1 to 11 being the history of the world before the Jews. And it's deliberately to put the attention on Gentiles and to say, listen, your ancestors had some awesome responsibility, but they didn't handle that very well. And that's why Jews are here, which is obviously a shock to their system to hear that. It's not very, flattering of Jews to hear that. So I'm not flattering myself when I say I exist because other people's ancestors screwed up, but there's no point in making like it didn't happen. So we speak about the Deuteronomy 32 worldview. Not going to go in detail in reading that out now. What I'm just going to say in a summary again is that with the, oh, actually, wait. Let's do this. You are students here. Who wants to help me out and give me a general summary of the Deuteronomy 32 worldview? So you don't have to quote it. If you want to read it, you actually could if someone wanted to. Anyone want to just tell us? Maybe someone's going to be watching this video for the first time and they don't know what we're talking about. So anyone willing to give an explanation in simple terms of what we call the Deuteronomy 32 worldview?
When when the nations divorced God.
Yep, there we go. See, Nanda,
How did we all get here?
Yeah. So Nanda, you need to get some royalties there because Kathy has used what we learned from your way of saying it, which I like, that I said last week. So well done to Kathy, who clearly listens and takes notes. It is an apt thing to say the nations divorced God, because that is what caused the reaction out of God to say, well, okay, you want to distance yourself from me, then I'm going to put the created Elohim, the gods, in inverted commas, that I've made, the celestial beings who have authority, who were there at creation, who I've shared the secrets of creation with, they can be your guardians. I'm putting some distance between us because of your rejection of me. That's what God did, and that would be then what we call the Deuteronomy 32 worldview as such. And it's in the wake of that situation that we find the flourishing of civilizations of pagan origin. And what you always find, though, is, and this is what makes it so easy to kind of see the breadcrumb trail, you always find elements of truth in all these pagan civilizations. You find overlaps between their cultural expression, their religious claims, and their ritual, in fact, with other religions. I actually remember, when I started getting into this, very seriously getting into the supernatural study stuff, obviously you end up going into paganism. I remember the shock and surprise when I started realizing, wait a minute, all of these stories are connected. There's too much overlap, even between people groups that were never in contact with each other, for this not all to have been centered in one place. And obviously from there you quickly discover Babylon or Babel is the place where this happens. So Deuteronomy 32 worldview, as Kathy said, ideally is the nations rejecting or divorcing God. And then God returns the favor and puts these lower beings over them. The intention, let's just get this clear, the intention at that point was not for these nations to be completely wiped out. It was to punish. It was to show the strain on the relationship with the God Almighty, the God Most High, Elyon, that they were supposed to be relating to. So it was meant to be that. Obviously, things got carried away. Both the people started worshipping those lesser gods in rebellion, sadly, and those lesser gods, sadly, in rebellion also accepted that worship, which created way bigger issues, and then really gave paganism its final thrust to become a permanent problem in the world. And that's literally, we are still in the throes of that effectively.